Hello, Iris J here with Madrona's Pulse Teachings. It is so nice to see you. So I am here starting what will be a weekly video on some type of chat with either the transits that are going on, educational videos for astrology. So I'll be doing this in addition to my new moon updates and full moon updates, trying to grow this channel and my offerings for you. So it's thank you for being here. It's nice to see you. Please do like and subscribe so that you can help me grow this channel, so that you can get my updates. If this is the first time you're watching me, I am Iris J. Gilday, and I am an evolutionary feminist decolonizing astrologer. I'm also a cultural theorist and an educator. I weave all of these lenses into the work I do, and my focus is on astrology for healing. So how can this ancient art, this ancient practice, this practice that is about feeling our rhythms with the earth, with the cosmos, with our psyche bodies, it all coming together, how can it support us all on our individual and collective journeys of healing is what I am really focused in and what I'm working with individuals and groups on. So what am I talking with you about today? This is Mars retrograde. So Mars retrograde is happening very soon from when I'm making this video. It's on October 30th, and the retrograde will last a few months up to January 12th, 2023. So every planet goes retrograde, and retrograde is part of a cycle, and astrology is about helping us tap into cycles and how we can work with the archetypes that the planets or asteroids represent. And so, Mars is particular because it goes retrograde less often than the other planets. So it's roughly every 2 years, which means that when it happens, there's kind of a focused energy for us to work with and be with. And so this is happening in Gemini. Okay, so what I'd like to do is I'd like to talk a little bit about Mars. I'd like to talk a little bit about Gemini so that we can put these together. And then I'll do a quick run through of how this is happening in the different houses, depending upon where you have Gemini in your chart. So you know that already, of course, or if you don't, you want to look at your chart and see where you have Gemini, and then you can kind of have a little sense of how this energy might show up in a more personal way for you, but I'll talk about that later. If you're just dying for that, you can go. There's timestamps below. And, this idea that I have in this title, this Mars retrograde, is working with a reclaiming of our drive, of our passion, a reclaiming of the masculine energy. And so I want to first and foremost say that when we use this language of masculine energy, we're really talking about a yang principle in the yin and yang. So this is not masculine attached to a traditional, typical gendered idea of man. However, Mars and those typical gendered understandings of men, especially in what we in today's language call toxic masculinity, is all over astrology. It's all over pop astrology. It's part of the myth. It's part of traditional astrology and working with Mars. And Mars retrograde is an incredible time for us to reclaim that within ourselves, i.e. turn that which has been kind of conditioned as toxic masculinity into a very healthy, integrated, thriving drive of action and desire within ourselves. And when we do that individually, what do you know? Social circles change. World changes, our relationships change, everything changes when we do this work on ourselves, because we can't but show up differently out there in the world. So this is really about a reclaiming energy. So let's talk about Mars a little bit, okay? So, Mars is associated with Aries, traditional, that god of war. And a lot of times, whenever Mars is coming up, we hear about war, we hear about sex, we hear about power and abuse of power. And again, there's reasons for this, but this is not what Mars retrograde means for us. Any retrograde, which again is when it looks like from the Earth's position, it looks like the planet is moving backwards because of the angle of how we're seeing it, and that lasts for few months. It depends upon what planet it is, and then it stations direct is the language that we use. And so with any retrograde, this is often thought of as a time for reflection. Just think about that symbolism of we've been going straight and then we have to kind of retrace where we came. When we retrace, when we're walking back along a path that we've already walked along, we notice things. We notice things differently. And then we're going to retrace it again when we go forward again, right? So we actually are going to see this path 3 times. So we're going to see this path in our Gemini area of our psyche house body 3 times as Mars is working in this way. And so the reflection, the retrograde, this is an incredible opportunity for us to really work with that Mars drive, passion, energy, okay? It is the action principle. That is what Mars represents. It's an action principle. It's the energy that helps us go out into the world, that helps us accomplish things. So you can already see just by that out in the world, accomplish things. You can see how the traditional gendered, this is male energy. Whereas Cancer, our mothering, nurturing, is traditionally female. Now, again, there's aspects to this, but here I am in my hot pink shirt talking about masculine energy, reclaiming it, however we want to work with it, however we want to manifest that energy. And so Mars retrograde is this incredible period to get in touch with our own reflecting on what that drive means for us, what our desire means for us. There is certainly a physicality to that desire. It can be a time to get in touch with the body. It can be in time to get in touch with that desire. Yet this is Mars retrograde in Gemini. So Gemini is an air sign. It's the 3rd sign of the zodiac. It's the sign that is all about ideas and communication, going back and forth, having sometimes dizzying thoughts, conversations, because there's a lot of energy in Gemini. There's a lot of mental stimulation. There is such beautiful curiosity in Gemini. The curiosity that is necessary to get any idea off the ground, to turn it into a project. Gemini is that beautiful mutable energy that's showing us how we can kind of shift perspective and learn. And so this period is really asking us to become aware of the relationship between our ideas and our drive and our passion. How do our ideas help us manifest whatever it is that we want to manifest in the day to day? Okay, this is kind of where that Gemini is coming in, but I want to talk a little bit more about this really reclaiming, okay? Unfortunately, Mars gets a lot of stereotypes, and when folks are kind of taught kind of simplistic ways of reading a chart, it's kind of like, oh, wherever there's Mars, there's going to be some type of abusive power, an experience of an abusive power. There's going to be this power imbalance. There's going to be issues with masculine figures. Now, of course, that can happen. But the astrology chart is not something to look at and insert a person into some pre-described diagnoses. Unfortunately, that happens a lot, and that's not how astrology is serving us. Astrology is serving us firstly to show us our relationship between our psyche and body and this incredible natural system of cycles that the earth is part of, and that the earth is part of a greater cosmos, and that we are part of a greater system of interconnectivity. And it's also helping us to get in touch with these archetypes, these kind of primal, raw forms of energy that manifest in different ways and have a living tradition and ever-evolving nature to them, and how they manifest within ourselves. And so a lot of times the archetypes get these stuck layers of social norms attached to them. And this absolutely happens to Mars. So I really encourage you during this period of, from end of October into 2023, let it inspire your resolutions, your New Year resolutions, if you do such things. Now we have all different words for them, but intentions, New Year intentions. How can reclaiming a healthy relationship with your own drive, your own passion, your own energy source that helps you enact our dreams, our goals, our desire? There's definitely ambition in Mars. What do you want to reclaim about that? What do you want it to look like for you? Okay. Not just climb the top of the social ladder because that's what they tell us we should be doing out there in the world. Not just accumulate, because that's what capitalism has taught us the purpose of life is. This is about getting in touch with our desires. Okay. And again, where you have Gemini in your chart is going to be a way that we can work with that. And really reclaiming Mars from any stereotypes that are toxic masculinity. Okay. We have the power to reclaim that because we have the power to shed that within ourselves. And when we do that, that's how we shift patriarchy into a more equitable social organizing force. And yes, Mars is part of that because we need the action, we need the drive. But we also need the thoughts and the imagination. And so Gemini is here, Mars is traveling through the sign, which can be a bit intense. Mars in Gemini represents a bit of an intensity. Just think of, that pure curiosity of thought, that pure imaginal quality of thought that we can go to pretty amazing places just in our minds, right? Sorry, I got so excited I shook the computer. So we can have, Mars in Gemini can kind of be going back and forth and we could even, not follow through with Mars and Gemini because there's so many ideas. But that's the beauty of the retrograde through Gemini is that slows down. And so maybe, as I said, first Mars has gone forward on this path and maybe we've had a lot of ideas. I know I've had a heck of a lot of ideas in the past few months, right? And astrology has been like Uranus has been there changing things up, giving us new ideas. As I'm making this, we're about to have 2 eclipses, right? So we are not alone. The ideas are kind of coming in. There's a lot of air energy in October, and that will carry us through into November. So as it slows down, we might reflect on those ideas, on those urges, on those thoughts, on those imaginings. And that's what we're being invited to do. And how do those ideas, how can you reflect on connecting your dreams, on connecting your new thoughts, on connecting new imagined versions of yourself, of your life in some way, whether it's relating to relationship or job or what your home looks like or how you want to dress and show your identity, however these thoughts might have been, coming about. How is there also maybe something in your drive, in your giving yourself permission to act the way you want to act? That is really what this retrograde is helping us. Because so many of us are kind of taught and we get in this slight paralysis of waiting for someone else out there in a position of power to kind of tap us and be like, okay, you can go do that now. Mars retrograde is that voice coming from within saying, oh, I can go do this now, right? So it's a time to really listen in to the thoughts that are going because they've been there. Watch how they're shifting over the next few months, over this, in the northern hemisphere, it's carrying us into winter, as we're really quieting down, as we're really coming in with ourselves in this seasonal shift. Our drive is also slowing down so that we can listen. And Gemini likes to be listened to. So it's a great time to journal. It's a great time to meditate. The air quality. And when we meditate, we kind of come into a place of self-witnessing so that we witness what's arising. We don't have to do anything with it. You don't have to do anything with the thoughts, with what you journal. It's just about letting it emerge. Okay. Then in the new year, that's when we'll probably start implementing some of the ideas that we've seen, okay? It's also, other ways to work with this energy, journal, meditation. It's a great time to talk. It's a great time to talk to someone about these ideas, whether that's your friend or that's your therapist, or you do, if you're feeling this energy or things I'm saying are resonating with you, it might be a great time to do an astrology reading and see what's going on for you, especially if you've never had one done before. Then you can see, where this energy is in your chart. Then you can see how the transits are working with you. Whole worlds open up. But it's a great time to be able to talk through what's going on internally. Sometimes even through journaling or even, through reflective practices on our own, we can't quite access certain levels that emerge when we're speaking. You could speak to yourself. I do also think it's a great time to do some work, whether that's with a therapist or it's in a community group. Gemini sign of close communities, sign up for something that's going on, whether it's an art therapy class that's going on at the community center. If you see a sign when you're out at the coffee shop, pay attention to those messages and see if there's some way that it can help you shift and work with the ideas, because this is really a time for reclaiming and shifting. So again, connecting that drive, that passion that deserves to be enacted in the world. A lot of us are taught to repress our Mars energy. Okay, traditionally, this has been done with women, men who are sensitive, men who are artists, if we're non-binary, trans, there's all parts of ourselves that get quieted, that get hushed. And this happens through when we're really young, right? And then we learn these habits. So Mars retrograde, when it comes to claiming our drive, is a wonderful time to do this for yourself. Again, it's also a time to notice when maybe our drive has been attached to some ideologies that do come from capitalism, that do come from colonialism, and we're actually ready to say no. It's more important for me to have a life in which I can rest, in which I can feel nourished, in which I can have time to develop a loving relationship with my partner than it is to just climb a social ladder and be validated in someone else's eyes, right? So it's a time when we're also going to be reassessing our values. Okay, stop there. I don't want this to get too long, but I do want to go quickly through the houses. So again, this is for where you have Gemini in your chart, because this is the area that Mars is transiting through. And so my first disclaimer before I do this, because I am not a pop astrologer and I do not do sun sign horoscopes, because they're very problematic from a very complicated understanding of astrology. So my disclaimer is that, let's say you have Gemini in your second house, okay? If you also have your sun there and you also have Venus there, your experience of this Mars retrograde is going to be very different than someone that has no planets in that house. Okay, so this is why it's really important to look at your chart, see what's there, and this is Mars is at 25 degrees of Gemini. It's going to go all the way back to 8 degrees, around 8 degrees, and then it's going to station forward and go and cross that path again. Okay, so most likely wherever you have something in Gemini, it's going to be impacted by this Mars energy. So again, then it becomes a blending of how these energies are working. And that's what astrology is all about, this beautiful art of interpretive blending. And so then again, if you have like a packed Gemini house, then you might want to work with an astrologer and see what's going on for you. But this is just general themes that will help you kind of reflect as you're reflecting through the next months. Okay, so if you have Gemini in your first house, and you might have it in your first and second house, you might have it in your 12th and first house. It depends upon what house system your chart was drawn up in. Okay, so you can just listen and go through the houses and see where it is. Okay, 8 degrees to 25 degrees. So Gemini, if you have it in the first house, here you're going to be reassessing, reflecting on that drive, that passion, that yang energy as it impacts your identity, how you want to show up in the world, how you want to be seen, how you want others to see you. These are going to be some questions that are coming up. You might have instances of conflict coming up where someone sees you a certain way and you want to be seen a different way. And then that, like, anytime there's that conflict, that's an invitation, especially in retrograde, for us to really pull back and reflect. Well, am I presenting the way that I want? Am I showing people the parts of myself that I want to be seen for? These are big questions, right? And how can my working with and reclaiming my right to have a drive and action out in this world How is that part of me working with my identity? Okay, so these are some questions that might come up if you have the transiting Mars going through your first house in Gemini. Second house. So this is traditionally thought of as the house of resources, okay? Now this is actually a big house. A lot of times we just talk about money. There's a lot more resources than money, but money is a resource, and we need money to accomplish things. We need money to have a roof over our head, unless we're on a certain path in life. So, but it's all of our resources. And so we're mostly going to be kind of really invited to reassess our resources, to reassess our relationship with our resources, to reassess how we want to be using our resources to build the life that we want. Okay. So this is resources from money to, you know, your physical body is a resource, our emotional resources, our whatever gifts we were born with. If you were just able to build things from a young age, that's a resource for you. If you were able to just do math from a young age, that's a resource from you. How are we using our resources? What is our relationship to those resources? So like, what is our relationship to our gifts? What's our relationship to money? And how can we be using these resources in a way that's really helping us to build the life that we want? Okay, because this is about desire. Mars is about desire. Okay, and how is creativity and thought, and that, you know, this is happening for you in a Gemini way. So what are the thought process and the thought patterns around your resources here? Okay. Third house, house of communication. So this is the home of Gemini. So if you have Gemini in the third house, you have a very strong third house with Gemini energy. And so this is our communication. This is how we think. This is how we kind of move out into our immediate world. This is, you know, the process of imagining. So this is, you know, just this rush of air energy asking us to really come in and reflect on our ideas, on our desires for communication. Is communication a big part of your life? You know, it's a big part of everyone's life, but maybe you do social media, maybe you're a writer, maybe you communicate through art. However you communicate, is there something in the way that you communicate or the way that you're sharing your work that wants to change, that wants to transform, that wants more of you behind it? Are you willing to put more of you behind it? Mars retrograde will help you look at this and how you can do that. Fourth house. Fourth house is the house of home. It's the house of our inner world. It's the house of our psyche. It's the house of our ancestors. So with Mars stationing through Gemini in your fourth house, how do you want to show up in your home? How do you want to show up in your psyche? How is there an opportunity to potentially clean up the psyche, to do that journaling work, to do that therapy work? How is there an opportunity to clean up a relationship with ancestors so that all the more of you in a healthy drive and a healthy connection with your psyche and your ancestors and your home? You know, most likely the home transforms because our relationship to ourself transforms. And that can then manifest and ripple out into your everyday world, because however we are at home, that's going to affect us out in the world. Okay. So really questions around home, both interior psyche home and then the actual home. And how does, you know, how does you being with your creativity and your imagination help you to imagine how you might want to transform that home, whether it's the psyche or whether it's your literal home? Okay. Fifth house, house of self-actualization. So if you have Gemini here, Mars is going through, you know, what are your creative projects? What are you thinking about? How are your creative projects, or you know, this is also the house of children, your relationships with children. It's really the house of just that You know, it's the house of romance, of course, but all of that is about the creative energy, okay? And it's the way that the self actualizes itself through that creative energy, whether it's through the energy of being with children, or whether it's through falling in love, or whether it's through that deep passion that emerges in your creative process. So this is where you're being asked to reflect on that creative process, to reflect on that creative energy, so that the self can shine more. Okay. And how does your inner masculinity, okay, again, regardless of your gender, how does that energy want to shine a bit more potentially? And how can you reflect on that? And how can you reflect on the reasons why maybe until now it wasn't time to show that drive in this way? But now in your creativity and the way that you are, and the way that people see you, and the way that you shine, it's time. So Mars retrograde is helping you to claim that for yourself. Okay. Sixth house. So if you have Gemini in the sixth house, Mars is transiting through your daily way of life, your daily habits. This is the house of health, but it's the house of health because the core of it is the house of our daily mind-body connection, what we eat, how we, our daily work routine, our daily routines, how we take care of ourselves, how we don't take care of ourselves. And so there's an opportunity here to really reflect on, how are you taking care of yourself? How are you showing up for yourself in your day-to-day life? How is your drive and your passion being directed in a way that facilitates you to really accomplish your goals? Okay, the sixth house is really important for accomplishing our goals. And this, you have, if you have Gemini here, you have an Aries sixth house. So your ideas are super important for you accomplishing your goals. And Mars going retrograde here is allowing you the opportunity to become a little bit more clear about how those ideas can be in a really functional process, and a functional process for you to be healthy in a way that nourishes you. Okay. And then again, reclaiming the right to take care of yourself. This is your energy in the sixth house. This is Mars transiting through the house that is your energy, that is your health, that is your self-care through your mind-body connection. Okay, meditation could be really nice here. Okay, developing, if you don't have one, a meditation practice. There's so much on YouTube to help you with that. And that could be a way of really kind of witnessing and coming in and getting quiet. And oftentimes the changes just kind of start unfolding as you claim whatever it is you want to claim in your day-to-day life. Moving on to the seventh house, this is our house of relationships. So if you have Gemini in your house of relationships, and Mars is moving through there, your one-on-one relationships are being impacted. Okay, this isn't bad. This means they're getting a charge of creative energy throughout this process. So what is it about you showing up in your one-on-one relationships? Okay, this is actually not about the other person. It doesn't matter if that's your partner or your business partner, or if you're kind of have a business where you have clients, and it's all one-on-one relationships. And this is not about them. Okay, this is about how you want to show up, how you want to take up space in your relationships, how you want to have a drive, in your relationships. And so this retrograde process, again, journaling, super important here. Talking, probably pretty important too, to those people, absolutely. But it also might be really important to talk to someone else, especially, let's say there is some challenges coming up in your partnership with whether you're married or common law, or just have whatever your partner looks like. These words, we don't need them, okay? Maybe there are challenges coming up, and maybe it'd be great to actually talk to a therapist or talk to someone that can kind of springboard ideas with you, so that you can gain sense of your own drive. Sometimes in relationships, we start confusing what we want with what they want. If we're together for a long time, that can go on for years. This might be a period to really kind of get a little bit of perspective, which is what a retrograde is all about how you want to show up, how you want to take up space in your relationships. How do you want to drive? How do you want your passion to come through? That's what Mars is there for, okay? Moving on to the 8th house. So this is the house of deep intimacy. This is the house of merging. Also the house of sexuality, really just coming together in these very, very deep ways. So if you have Mars, shifting through this house, this can be intense. It's usually, it is an intense house. And those with us that are born with a lot in the 8th house, just kind of intensity is, we know the transformative process. The 8th house is the house of transformation as well. So Mars here is really allowing, it's like going under the surface of things and seeing how you want to bond with others. How do you want to manifest strength and drive, in that place where we actually lose a part of ourselves because we're so bonded with another person. And that can be emotionally, that can be financially, this is all the types of bondings and the losing of the self. And so when Mars is going retrograde, it is such a wonderful time to literally breathe in some air. Literally take a big breath for 3 months. This, breath work would be great if you have Mars going through your 8th house, if you have an 8th house that has Gemini in it, as would really creative, free flow journaling, free flow drawing, kind of expressive arts work with the Gemini energy of Mars in retrograde would be a great practice in your 8th house, because it's going to allow you to get insights in the 8th house. Even though Gemini is an air sign and air signs like words, the 8th house sometimes needs to communicate in poetry, or it needs to communicate in image. It doesn't always translate into regular ordinary language. So Mars retrograde is a great time to actually get some insight into what you're feeling through that airy way, whether that's journal, poetry, or art, however you want to do that. And then how do you want to be a driving force in those deep relationships? How do you want to show up in your own deep psyche? Because that's also what the 8th house is about. And how do you want to claim your right to be empowered when you're merging with others? 9th house. 9th house, we are talking about a house that likes ideas. We're talking about a house that likes exploring. So, Mars retrograde, maybe you do go exploring, or maybe you go exploring through different learning systems, or maybe you just take time and you stop something that you were doing so that you can get more of an idea of what you want, whether that's in a program or plans that you had. It's, Mars retrograde, it's not like you're going to stop everything. Mars retrograde can be a time when projects actually begin, because we've shifted our gaze a little bit and we can see the energies that are wanting. It's often a time when new projects begin, if they're beginning, right? So not to say that if you have Gemini in the 9th house and Mars is going, you're just going to start a new project, but it is a time when you could get insight into new desires to expand your consciousness, to expand your business, to expand your relationship to the world. Definitely travel could come up, desires for travel, you could go traveling. Really a time to watch your intuition. If you have Gemini in the 9th house and you have this Mars retrograde, definitely a time to really listen to your intuition and see what you want, and have the courage to start working with what you want, because Mars is about what you want. Okay. 10th house. Okay, so this is the house of how we show up out in the world. Traditionally thought of as the house of career, but career is a pretty limiting word. So I like to work with it of how we want to show up, of how we want our energy out in the world, of yes, it's our reputation, but reputation is certainly a tricky word in a capitalist society. So it's really, how do you want to show up? Okay, how do you want your work to show up in the world? How do you want to be seen in the world? And so here, again, this retrograde might be a pulling back. It might be a changing direction. It might be an insight into new ways that you can show up, into new business opportunities, that was my dog. That was my dog shifting the computer. You know, I wish I could show you him, but that'll be too messy. You'll see him at some point. So how do you want to show up? And again, going with this theme of reclaiming masculine energy, masculine yang principle energy. Has your Mars, you know, the way that you show up, you're getting an opportunity to really own your drive in the world. That's a bit of a gift. Okay. So reflect on that. What do you want to do? What do you want to, you know, show up as? What do you want to make? You can do it. Okay, so this Mars retrograde is really helping you to find the permission within yourself to understand through, you know, these Gemini curious imaginings how you can show up. So really take some time and imagine what you want. Imagine what brings happiness to how you show up in the world. And Mars retrograde will help you do that. 11th house. So here we're entering into wider networks. Here we're entering into wider communities. Mars retrograde going through this house, helping to reevaluate networks, helping to reevaluate social networks, helping to do you use social media? Is it part of your business? Is it part of how you connect with people? Are there new ways that you could do that? Do you desire to meet new types of people? Do you desire to bring your work to a different level? How do you want to do that? You deserve to do that if you have the desire to do that. So maybe this is time to really reflect on what your desires are kind of in that bigger world, whether that world is digital or whether that is a mix of digital and in real life, or whether it's all in real life, depending upon who you are and what you do. But here is some opportunity to really get new ideas about how you can be forming connection with others. Where connection is such a place where inspiration happens, and Mars is helping you with that. Okay. And 12th house Geminis. So if you have Gemini in your 12th house, Mars is retrograde through your deep unconscious, through your ability to dissolve and be with the divine. You know, and this is a bit, that was my dog shaking in case you heard that. This is a bit of a contradiction here, because the 12th house is actually about the total dissolving of the ego, and Mars is very much concerned with our ego. It's aligned with Aries. There's a lot of instinct, impulse. And so here there's kind of a potential, especially during the retrograde, of a total dissolving. This is an opportunity to actually get really quiet, especially if you tend to have a chatty mind. Here, meditation, absolutely. Listening to really calming music, whatever calming music is for you. Maybe it's instrumental, maybe it's ambient, you know, really the practices that help you dissolve. And in kind of in this place of letting your ego dissolve, of letting even your drive dissolve during this retrograde process. When it goes back stationing direct, there could be a deeper connection between you and the divine. There could be a deeper connection within your spirituality. This is definitely a time to be nurturing and working with your spirituality, getting messages about how you want to bring your spirituality into the world, into your own life, how you want that driving force of spirituality to come through. This is a time to really be with that. Okay, that was it. I've gone through them all. Thank you so much. Please subscribe to my channel. Really helps me spread my Madrona's Pulse teachings. I'd love to see comments, or if you have questions, I really love to see questions too. You can throw them in down there and I will respond. And blessings in this Mars retrograde.